Before we begin, imagine this: a man who spent decades smiling on red carpets, standing tall, the world's most elegant spy, quietly arranging the details of a future he knew he might never see. A future where his family would open envelopes, read letters, and discover a fortune so carefully structured that it made them cry, not because of greed, not because of shock, but because of the meaning behind every dollar he left behind. Pierce Brosnan, known worldwide as the charismatic secret agent James Bond, lived a life that most would describe as successful, glamorous, and filled with fame. But behind the expensive suits, the slow-motion movie entrances, and the oceanfront homes that shimmered under golden sunsets, there was a man who thought far ahead. A man who believed in preparing for silence long before silence arrived. His family always knew he was responsible and forward-thinking. But what they didn't know was how deeply he had planned the financial roadmap of his legacy. This story begins not with excitement, but with structure. Brosnan was a man who took organization seriously. He was slow, precise, and methodical. This approach was present in his acting career, and it eventually shaped his personal affairs as well. Whenever he earned income from films, commercials, brand endorsements, or investments, he would write things down, not in digital files, not in complicated software, but in notebooks, dozens of them. A practice some of his family members considered old-fashioned, but he enjoyed it because it gave him clarity. Over the years, Pierce accumulated wealth steadily. It didn't happen overnight. His rise to financial stability was almost boring in its predictability. And that is exactly how he wanted it. He never rushed into risky ventures. He preferred slow-growth investments, real estate with long-term returns, and financial decisions that wouldn't collapse within a year. This steady approach resulted in something substantial, something that would matter to his family long after his voice disappeared from interviews and film sets. His home life, unlike the exciting scenes of his movies, was simple. Brosnan would often spend quiet mornings reading newspapers, drinking tea, and calculating things through in his mind. He was not loud, he was not flashy, and he had no interest in unnecessary drama. These calm routines formed the backbone of how he planned his wealth. While the world adored him for action and thrill, he built his legacy through stillness and consistency. But the real turning point came after personal tragedy, a tragedy that forced him to rethink everything. The loss of his first wife, Cassandra Harris, and later the devastating loss of his daughter, Charlotte, made him reconsider every aspect of life. He no longer saw wealth as material comfort. He began to view it as a message that his family would one day read, not with celebration, but with tears, because behind the money was memory, emotion, and intention.
During this period, Pierce began restructuring his estate. He became interested in trusts, carefully designed legal arrangements that ensured his wealth would be protected, distributed, and preserved exactly how he wanted. He didn't want confusion. He didn't want arguments. And he certainly didn't want the world interfering in his family's affairs. His goal was to design something clear, something stable, something boring, but deeply meaningful. He separated his wealth into categories: personal assets, professional assets, real estate holdings, intellectual property rights, and charitable funds. Every category had a purpose. Every dollar had a direction. He took pride in this structure, and over the years, it became the foundation of his future legacy. To his family, especially during quiet dinners or vacations, Pierce would occasionally mention planning for the long run, but he always did so casually, like someone discussing the weather. He avoided dramatic statements. He preferred to keep things factual and measured. That's why, when the time came for his family to discover everything he had arranged, they cried. Not just because of how much he left, but because of how deeply he considered their emotional needs, their responsibilities, and their futures. And thus begins the story of Pierce Brosnan's fortune, not a flashy, thrilling adventure, but a slow, steady path shaped by responsibility, loss, and love. Part 2. Pierce Brosnan's journey toward building his vast fortune was not just the result of blockbuster films or fame-driven opportunities. It was shaped by patience, thoughtful decisions, and a surprising level of restraint. Many actors chase rapid growth, high-risk deals, or extravagant lifestyles, but Pierce took a calmer, more measured path. This section of the story explores the foundations of his wealth and the quiet decisions that eventually shaped the emotional reactions of his family. Long before he was James Bond, Brosnan had already begun shaping his financial philosophy. Coming from humble beginnings in Ireland, he knew early on that stability mattered. When he later moved into acting, he viewed money with seriousness, always storing away a portion of anything he earned. His early co-workers often noted that Pierce was grounded. He didn't make reckless purchases, and he rarely attended lavish Hollywood parties. Instead, he focused on improving his craft, completing his projects, and making decisions that ensured long-term financial strength. When he landed the role of James Bond, the world assumed he would indulge in luxuries. But surprisingly, he continued living modestly. His paychecks increased significantly, but his habits stayed the same. He invested, he conserved, and he carefully maintained his financial boundaries. He bought a few beautiful homes, yes, but even those homes were long-term investments chosen for strategic reasons, not unnecessary extravagance. His primary residence in Malibu, which eventually became famous, was not purchased to display wealth. It was chosen because of its durability, its location, and its value. Years later, a tragic wildfire destroyed that home, but even then, Pierce responded with calm and clarity. He rebuilt, reassessed, and reinvested. His financial decisions were never emotional. They were always steady, precise, and grounded. One of the most remarkable aspects of Pierce's financial journey was his interest in royalties and intellectual property. Most actors receive their payments and move on. Pierce, however, understood the power of owning rights and receiving long-term income. His Bond films, television appearances, and production projects continued to generate revenue long after the cameras stopped rolling. He often told close friends that intellectual property was the real investment because it never aged and never wore out. But perhaps his most important decisions were the quiet ones: his investments in art, environmental projects, and sustainable ventures. These were not things he broadcasted. No major headlines were made. But year after year, Brosnan placed funds into projects that would either grow slowly or benefit the world in some way. He believed that true wealth was not about speed, but about longevity. His children often saw him sitting alone, reading financial documents, writing notes, or reviewing plans. He rarely talked about the numbers, but his consistent behavior spoke loudly. They knew he was preparing something organized, something intentional. Yet, it wasn't until he began meeting with attorneys and estate planners that his intentions fully took shape. This was during a period when he had already faced significant personal grief. Those experiences changed the tone of his planning. What started as financial structure slowly transformed into emotional legacy. He began drafting letters, personal letters, handwritten with calm and steady handwriting. Letters he intended to leave behind alongside the financial documents. These letters were not dramatic. They were not poetic. They were simple, slow, and sincere. They explained why he made each decision, who he was thinking of, and what he hoped for the future of his family. When his family eventually read those letters, that's when the tears came. Not because of the money, but because of the intentions behind it. Part 3. The moment Pierce's family opened his estate papers, they were met not with surprises, but with overwhelming emotion. The structure was simple, boring, almost mathematical. It reflected the man who built it. But the meaning behind each section carried weight. The estate was separated into categories designed for clarity. Trusts for his children, funds for education and future grandchildren. Long-term investments that would continue paying out for decades. Properties arranged in a way that minimized legal burden. Art collections stored safely with detailed instructions.
Environmental donations set to activate automatic litters addressed to each family member. Each section showed thoughtfulness. It showed care. It showed quiet love. His children, who had grown up surrounded by fame, suddenly realized how deeply he had planned for them. It wasn't the amount of money that mattered. It was the calmness in his handwriting, the patience in his structure, the knowledge that he had spent years preparing something for them without making a big deal out of it. One of his sons reportedly said that the letters were harder to read than anything else. Not because of sadness, but because of how calmly Pierce expressed his hopes. There were no dramatic sentences, no emotional exaggerations. Just simple messages. Use these funds wisely. Think long term. Keep the family together. Invest with purpose. Live simply. Take your time. These were the kinds of lines he wrote, lines that reflected the quiet way he lived his life. The art collection, one of Pierce's most prized possessions, was arranged in a trust. He had spent years painting, collecting, and preserving artwork. He left detailed instructions on which pieces were to be sold, which were to be kept, and which were to be donated. His family found this particularly moving, because art was one of the things he cherished most privately. The real estate portion of his estate included properties that had been in his possession for decades. Some were family homes, some were rentals, some were long-term investments he barely spoke about. Each property had a purpose, either financial stability or emotional memory. What made his family cry most was the Legacy Fund, a special section designed to support causes Pierce cared about. Environmental preservation, ocean conservation, wildlife protection. These were things he invested in not for recognition, but for peace of mind. He set up the fund to continue operating quietly for many years. His children realized that even in his estate planning, he thought about the world beyond himself. His wealth, combined with the meaning behind it, became a message of who he truly was. A quiet man, a responsible man, a man who planned ahead, a man who wanted the world and his family to experience stability long after he was gone. And that is why they cried. You want to say like, comment, and subscribe in a nice, simple, boring style line for your storytelling videos? Here are some options. Pick the style you like.